Good evening and welcome to Hello It's Us, a program based on the premise that life in general goes better if all of us are working to the same goal as opposed to you, me, and them working at cross purposes. Hello It's Us is brought to you through a collaboration of the Center for Disabilities and Development, the Extended Dream Foundation, and all the folks here at Public Access Television Channel 18. I'm Terry Cunningham. This is Keith Ruff, my co-host.
Good evening, Terry.
Howdy. And we're happy to have all of you join us. Tonight we're going to go on an issue a bit away from what we typically deal with, and that's violence of all sorts.
Yes.
Domestic violence, violence involving children, violence involving the elderly, violence involving folks with disabilities.
And even athletes.
Yeah. And it's primarily, there's no hiding it at this point. Most of the talk this past week has been about a football player for the Baltimore Ravens and his fiance, now wife, and an issue at a casino in Atlantic City, where apparently there was an argument. They got in an elevator, and she made a move at him, and essentially he knocked her out. And of course, there's no way this is acceptable. And this happened back in February, I think. And part of the tape and the complaint got to the office of the commissioner of the National Football League. And they spent some time looking at things and handed down a 2-game suspension, and he had to go to some violence therapy training, whatever.
And then they showed the second tape.
And that didn't come into play until like in the last week. But there was a real outcry across the country from all kinds of groups that a 2-game suspension was appropriate. And people were saying it should have been 6, it should have been 8, it should have been a whole season. Well, because of that outcry, about 2 weeks ago, the commissioner announced that the new penalties for that would be 6 games for a first-time offense and an indefinite suspension.
Yeah.
I thought it was a ban for life.
Yeah.
Well, so that went into effect, and there are 2 players who are currently awaiting trials for domestic abuse charges.
Yeah.
But the end of last week, another tape was released. There was one that showed them coming off the elevator.
With the punch.
No, that wasn't the first one.
Okay.
It just showed him pulling her out of an elevator. This one showed what actually happened in the elevator.
Yeah.
And again, there was a tremendous outcry that, how could this happen? How could they have not investigated properly? How could other people have the tape and they didn't? And, da-da-da. So as a result of that tape, the Ravens released him. And the NFL put him on an indefinite suspension, which has immediately raised the issue, how can they do that? They had already handed down his punishment, had created what the new one would be, yet gave him something entirely different.
All it indicates to me, and probably to you, is a big mistake on their part.
It does, and there's been a lot of conversation generated about why you never know whether this was the first time or not.
No.
They both said it was, but the fact that men just don't hit women, period. There's no excuse. He's a professional football player. You can't convince me. All he had to do was hold his arms out, and he could have certainly controlled her.
Yes.
But she sent an instant message out of how badly they feel and how much trouble this has caused for their family, and now that everybody is looking badly at them, and what should happen. And a lot of what it points out is that the National Football League doesn't really understand domestic violence.
I don't think any league really understands it. They know about it, but they don't have a good policy.
Well, and that's what folks have been saying. Well, the average person may not have access to all the information.
Yeah.
The NFL has on their security staff
Yeah.
former FBI agents, former Secret Service agents. For God's sakes, they're a $9 billion a year industry. They've got the resources to get in touch with the leading experts on domestic violence and on what domestic violence programs should be. And they should have a program set up that, if it doesn't screen people, certainly would help people after they got into domestic violence issues. But, and I mean, I know myself, I have thought a lot of times during my life when you read about domestic violence and how somebody has gotten killed or somebody has gotten seriously injured, and this has been going on for years and years. And certainly part of it is a societal issue in that you don't mess in other people's private lives. You may know that a friend, a relative, a neighbor
Next door.
is abusing
Another.
the spouse, and I mean
Yeah.
we all know that it can go either way, but you turn a blind eye.
Because you don't want to get into it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, as they say, sometimes people die from that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a spouse, sometimes it's a parent,
Sometimes
it's a child.
Yeah.
and that's just so inexcusable. And and it happens every place. It's not just a big city, a small town, it can happen any place.
Anywhere. And the reason Jerry and I bring it up too is that it does happen in the disabled, disability community quite frequently.
Unfortunately, that's true.
Yes.
It happens in all aspects of life as you age. But typically, people who fall victim to this are seen as weak in one way or another.
Yes.
Or dependent, could be, a wife who is a stay-at-home mom, doesn't have, money of their own, and put up with it because they have no idea what to do.
Or how
You know,
to deal with it.
And there isn't, there's unfortunately are not nearly enough domestic abuse shelters where people can go to and feel safe and talk to professionals. And we constantly hear about a domestic violence issue where someone will call the police and they'll come and somebody will be taken away for it. But when push comes to shove, the person who was abused chooses not to press charges.
Yes.
And it's because, oh, well, he said he was sorry, he's not going to do it again, and this and that, and we ultimately find out that it's been happening for years. So, and it's just not that easy for somebody to walk out and try and start a new life. If they've got no money,
Right.
if they've got no place to live, if they've got no job, if they've got kids, and you have the whole, how are we going to keep the kids? And, it's just one of those dirty, not so little secrets that is probably reaching epidemic proportion.
Yes.
Because you know darn well that like many other things, for every instance we know that it happens.
There are more than that.
Sure. And, we also have an issue with elder abuse in this country.
Yes.
And again, it's one of those people don't want to get involved things because most often an elderly person who's being abused is being abused by a caretaker or a family member.
Yeah.
It might be, two grandkids, whatever, living with grandma, supposedly helping her out, and instead, are basically ignoring her, going through all the money,
Or taking a bed.
not feeding properly, all that. And again, if somebody knows that's going on, they're still very hesitant
Yeah.
to report it.
And unfortunately, in some cases, besides elder abuse, disabled children are abused or neglected,
Sure.
either one.
Sure. Well, and unfortunately, there aren't any federal laws related to that. Each state kind of has their own, and Iowa is really, really slow coming to the table. I mean, they ramped up the elder abuse legislation again this year, but it still has a long way to go.
Yeah.
And one of the problems with Iowa's is you have to be considered a dependent individual to be able to be abused, which just isn't right. If you're managing everything and somebody still manages to take advantage of you or manage to abuse you,
Still not.
you
Right.
should get protection.
Yes. It still doesn't say it right.
No. And it doesn't save lives because, again, people get killed there.
Yeah.
Or people get neglected and get seriously ill and may or may not be getting the medication they need. And it just, you have people who suffer needlessly and die because nobody wants to get involved.
And as people with disabilities are living much longer than usual. There's gonna be more of a preference or a likely preference that's gonna happen more and more.
Well,
Unfortunately.
there's certainly the opportunity. And because individuals with disabilities, much like elderly abuse, find themselves dependent on other people for help,
Yes.
to help them with their activities
The
of daily
daily
living,
activity.
just that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, if you have no choice, you'll put up with some pretty pathetic people.
You
And I know that because I've done that myself before.
I've done it too.
You have no choice. You either have this person who you really don't want,
But
you wouldn't
there's no one
recommend
else.
to anybody else, but
But there's no one else out there.
they show up. It might be when they want, not when you want them. And once they get there, they may or may not do what you
Yeah.
want them to.
And the more disabled you are, the more they can take advantage of that.
Though we want to emphasize, when we say this, that we're in no way implying that means folks with disabilities should be living in institutions.
Right? Don't take us the wrong way.
That just means that there's a need for
Better education.
better services, of people receiving better training, because one of the fastest growing jobs that's predicted is healthcare folks,
Yeah.
because not only are folks with disabilities living longer, everybody is living longer in general, and there's more and more of a demand for home and community-based services.
Yeah.
People who come to your home to perform the services necessary for you to get up and on your way
Yeah.
and do what you do for the day, and then again in the evening to help you get down. And
Like
and that.
we just had the head of Home Instead on the show a few weeks ago. And she said by the year 2020, there should be 80 million people over 65 in this country.
Yeah, and most of those folks have long since decided that they don't have any intention of going to a nursing home or some other kind of facility.
Yeah.
They know that with the right supports, they can live in the community.
Just like you and
And,
I.
yeah, and that's what they want to do. And that's, those are the folks who are in the elderly group. Well, hell, we are too now. But so you get that double need there. But, the level of violence in the United States has gotten so ridiculous.
Out of proportion.
And in some communities, it's accepted as the
Normal.
way of life, because that's the way it's been for years and years. And
Unfortunately.
when communities have given up, and the young people in communities have given up on school and education, and everywhere they look around them, the people who are doing well, who have money, who dress nicely, who have cars and all of that, are gangsters.
Yeah.
They make their living
Off
in crime.
Yeah.
And those who butt up against them frequently end up dead.
Eliminated.
Join or get out.
Yeah.
And that, or they see athletes, professional athletes,
Get away with it.
who have obscene amounts of money. It's just, I remember back to when you and I were growing up, and professional athletes had to have a job in the off season so their family could live.
Just to make a living.
Even if you were the best.
Yeah.
I think Jackie Robinson worked in an appliance store or a car dealership, but
Duke Snyder worked in a car dealer.
But we all know the number of people who actually make it to the professional level in any sport, whether it's men's or women's, volleyball, basketball, golf, whatever, is a minuscule amount from all those starry-eyed kids who at 4, 5, 6-year-olds started down that trail of that's what they were going to be. And as they got older, more and more discovered each year that they weren't going to be a professional.
And
As much as they wanted, the skill just wasn't there. And that just, for some people becomes all-consuming. And if you're a good enough player at a young enough age, people start protecting you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that includes educational systems. And it becomes a whole lot more important whether you're showing up for practice and winning games than if you're showing up for class and passing classes.
Yeah.
So the farther some people get on, the more they're taken care of, but the less they know.
And Derry, let's not avoid one area that we haven't done. Violence against women. Especially.
Oh yeah, well I think we started with that, but yeah, and
especially in this community.
yeah, how many attacks or attempted attacks
Yes.
have already taken care of this class year? No, and I just have trouble believing all of that. I was brought up knowing, and I'm part of it because my dad was a state trooper.
Yeah.
You don't touch women.
Right.
And that especially meant there were 8 kids in my family, 5 boys, 3 girls. That also meant, whatever as a family we might do, the old, I can do whatever I want to my brothers and sisters, but heaven help you if you touch them, was really prevalent in my family.
Yeah.
And if, one of the girls was complaining about somebody bothering them at school or whatever, my dad would make some very short statement and give that kind of nod to the brothers, which meant one of you all better take care of this. And that was the way everybody else I grew up with grew up.
And
This is what you do. You don't. And, there was never a question that no meant no. No didn't mean maybe. No didn't mean try going a little farther. No meant, the evening is over.
And you would think at a college level, it would level off, but it doesn't seem to level off.
Well, and, we also have to take into the fact that alcohol comes into play there.
Yes, yes.
And most any situation, if you throw alcohol into it,
A party.
you
Yeah.
just never know what's going to happen. But once again, we burned through our time.
Yes.
We made it tonight. That's kind of
We
interesting.
hope this unusual episode makes a lot of sense to all of you out there, because Terry and I are strictly against any kind of violence.
Absolutely. If you know someone you suspect is being abused,
Report it,
call
please.
somebody, yes. Check with your local domestic violence
Yes,
organization. Do something. Don't stand by
and let it
saying,
go.
that's not my business, because that could just as easily be a sibling, be a mother,
Oh,
be a
yeah.
grandmother, or be a neighbor. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Till next week.
Have a good week.